Hi everybody, the vinyl community, John back here again. In this video I've got quite a mixed bunch of recent finds, or finds that I've made over the past few weeks. There's some psychedelia, I've got some rock, some blues, and yeah, unusual things. So I'm going to start off by showing this. This is an album made or recorded at a concert. In 1972 there was a pop festival, or a rock festival I suppose we'd say these days, in Puerto Rico, which is an island apparently, and for some reason, which I haven't really understood why, it was quite unpopular with the islanders and the people there, and even the press sort of gave it a big slating. But apparently, if you were there, it was apparently really good. And I will say this, that the tracks that are presented on this album are very, very good. I'm going to actually stand up and put it on to play in the background while I talk more about this. Yeah. It sounds like a really good gig, one that would have been nice to have been at, you know. Apparently the speakers used at the concert were the very same ones that had been used at Woodstock, and one of the guys that was in charge of sort of organising the festival, can't remember his name now, I'll write it here. There was a warrant out for his arrest. I think it's because, you know, this concert perhaps didn't have proper permission or something, I don't know. But he avoided arrest by leaving the concert and leaving the island before the police got hold of him. So there's a list of people that played at this gig that are on this record. You've got the Allman Brothers, John Baldry, Cactus, Dr. John, Jonathan Edwards, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, J. Giles Band, B.B. King, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Herbie Mann, Nitzinger, whoever they are, and Osibisa. I understand that Black Sabbath were due to take part, and they were actually there, but for some reason they couldn't get to the gig in time to be able to play. There were a few other people that played that don't appear on this record, and the faces were actually performed live on stage, but they're not included here. Apparently there are a few bootleg records out there of the gig that perhaps include other people that aren't included on this record, but it's beautifully recorded, and it sounds like a really good gig that would have been fantastic to have been at. That's what I can tell you about it. There's about 30,000 people there apparently. So, an interesting thing. I picked this up in my hometown Chelmsford shortly before Wales went on its second lockdown. I popped over to England quickly to spend a few days with my mother, who was having a birthday, and whenever I go over to Chelmsford, my hometown in Essex, it's nice to sort of, you know, cruise around the charity shops there and see what I can pick up, look at the record shops too, and this was in an Oxfam shop actually. There's a very, very good record department in an Oxfam shop there in Chelmsford, and yeah, it stood out, and I picked it up because I thought, well, you know, it's got some big names in it, it's probably quite special, and it is. This has never been released on CD. The only other thing I can tell you about this is that more or less a week after I got this and brought it home, I saw that Derek Higgins showed it in one of his videos, coincidentally. There you go. So that's the Merry Soul. is a record that I picked up, yeah, a few weeks ago. Quite special. It's a compilation, or it's a sampler really, for this record label called Saga. I really liked the cover when I saw it, and that's, you know, what drew me to it. And then looking at it, seeing, you know, that there's probably something quite special about this. Yes, I brought it home with me. Now, the cover is sort of kind of a psychedelic cover. Is a montage of lots of images that are taken from the records that are represented on here. So, for instance, this big face is on the front of Herbie and the Royalists album, and this one here is sort of I think a Scottish Scotland the Brave, sound of John Leslie. So it's an interesting mixture of blues rock, psychedelia, and kitsch. You know, you've got like the Scottish thing, and there's also, I think there's an Irish thing as well here, which is just Islander Go-Go, for instance. I mean, it says it all, doesn't it? But then otherwise you've got bands like everybody. So I'm just going to jump in here. Yesterday when I was filming this section, I got a bit tongue-tied and mixed up some of the names of people that I'm going to talk about on here. But first of all, there's a band on here called The Good Earth, who are the band that featured Ray Dorset, that went on to eventually form Mungo Jerry afterwards. They are on a record that I know I've seen. I think I've seen John at Baggy Hi-Fi show. It's a record with a mini on it, sort of a psychedelic cover. And it's a record that has the first impressions on the mixed in songs with The Good Earth. So there you go. But yeah, I've been quite enjoying looking through on Discogs to see various different covers and how they've taken bits from here and sort of montaged it into a nice cover. Some of these tracks are actually quite rare because they're made by people sort of quite independently and quite quickly too. It's hard to really understand the dynamics of these things back in the 60s and 70s, you know, because apparently people would just go in, bang out music cheaply and record it on record, and you'd have people like W.H. Smith or Boots in the UK selling these things cheaply. And it's hard to believe that anyone would actually go and buy them, but well, they did, because they were being sold cheaper than, you know, records made by famous bands, famous artists. Anyway, so that's that one. Quite an unusual record. I'm going to do a few needle drops of this and see if I can get
I guess I'm going down the line to find a girl who's gonna treat me real fine. But I've got no idea when I'll be back here. I'm gonna find some. I stay in my bed all of the day, 'cause a job is no destination. I stay in my bed all of the day, 'cause a job is no destination. Don't stay there where they hate you. week will pass. So all I wanna do is get up and dance. Open up, let me in. She's got a great big hold on me. Open up, I say it again. Let me come into your party. I've got some food under my arm.
Got Saga in a sleeve. Swinging Saga. This is a record that I picked up in Bangor. One of my recent videos I spoke about my trip around Wales for my holiday this summer, and I talked about how I met up with Sean Whelan, and he took me to a record place in his town, and this is actually one that I found there. I forgot to include it in the ones that I showed, but I think I paid £6 for this, and it's a real treasure. So it's the second Rolling Stones album, the one issued here in Great Britain. It's an absolute original. Sadly, it's got one or two little pen marks here, like there for instance, but otherwise it's relatively well preserved. It's a good clean copy, I will say that, but there is a bit of pen on the label there. I don't know why anyone would do that. I guess somebody wrote their name on it and then somebody else has gone over and scribbled out the name or something, but otherwise beautiful copy. It's quite special apparently because I was reading up about the various different editions of this record, and the early original issues had text on the back that was redacted and changed for later issues because it's quite controversial, and I'll read you what that text is. It's a mono, so it's right up here. It's sort of this text talking to the buyer to you know, how to go about getting money to buy the record. So it says, cast deep in your pockets for loot to buy this disc, for groovies and fancy words. If you don't have bread, see the blind man, knock him on his head, steal his wallet, and lo and behold, you have the loot. If you put it in the boot, good, another one sold. Back to the show. All was on the go. Fame was having its toll of sweat and grime of a million dimes. Ah, what a lovely war. So it carries on. I think mainly it's just this issue of talking about knocking over a blind man and stealing his money so you can afford to go out and buy this record. It's there on the back. Really good record. But anyway, so yeah, spent £6 on that. Really good find. So this is a new record that I've got just recently. I probably don't need to say too much about this. It's the Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle. I hadn't understood just how good this one really is. I'd sort of seen the cover. This is a real classic cover, isn't it? And you know, often sort of held aloft when people are talking about psychedelia and things. And yeah, I didn't really know what it was. I thought it might be one of those records where you see it all around, but once you finally get hold of it and listen to it, it's not very interesting. But this is cracking. It's really, really good. From start to finish, all the tracks are really solid, all the songs are really good, and yeah, it sounds fantastic. This isn't an original by any means. It's one that I bought sort of a reissue of Amazon, just to be able to sort of hear what it's all about, and I'm glad that I did that because it sounds fantastic. It really, really is a good record. For anyone that doesn't know the Zombies, they were really only sort of a short-lived pop band in the 60s. I think this was their second album, and they actually broke up before they'd launched this record, they made it in Abbey Road Studios, which is probably why it sounds so good. But also the songwriting is just amazing. It's really good. But yeah, they'd sort of broken up and gone off to do other things before this hit the streets. And when it did hit the streets, you know, people were calling out for them to come and perform, but of course they'd all moved on, so they couldn't do that. Really good record. Recommend that to anyone that hasn't ever listened to this. If you like 60s psychedelic pop stuff, this is really, really good. This is a record I've got as well in recent weeks. It's the Butterfield Blues Band. Very happy with this. I quite like the cover. So, Paul Butterfield Blues Band, they were essentially, as I understand, sort of the American equivalent to you know, what John Mayall was doing in the early days, when he was sort of recruiting people like Eric Clapton and Al Green. Not Al Green. I'm talking about. Yeah, you know who I mean. To go and play in his band, because it was sort of like blues revival, I suppose, and they were sort of looking very closely at some of the original blues and, you know, putting a fresh spin on it, making it sound sharper and edgier, I guess, and that's what you got here. Mike Bloomfield actually played in the first incarnation of this band, I think, for the first couple of albums actually, and then he left to go and do his other stuff, but in the meantime, somebody else in the band, somebody called Alvin Bishop, got promoted up, and he took over the sort of lead guitar in this album. Really good record. It's I don't know much about this type of blues from the States, but it's on Elektra. picked up at the same time as I picked up that Mary Soul album that I just showed at the beginning. He's used to be the guitarist in 10 Years After, and I had quite high hopes for this, I must admit, because I like his guitar work in that band, and I always have thought Alvin Lee is someone that I want to know more about, it's kind of disappointing, I must say. I mean, it's a nice record cover, I like the idea of that, but it's just, I don't know, the songs aren't really anything special, and I think even his guitar playing is fairly mediocre in this too. You have to forgive my my camera knocking about like that. My blind dog is walking about underneath it and she doesn't know what she's doing. Occasionally she bumps into my tripod. So that's Alvin Lee. Yeah, I can't really say much more about this to make anyone interested. I thought it was going to be better than it was, but it's a little bit juvenile as well, I think. Maybe it's aimed at a very young audience. You'd expect it to be aimed at much more of a sophisticated audience than it is, but there you go. This is a Chuck Berry compilation. I come across these now and again. I grabbed this one purely because it's on Chess, and I quite like the cover. All-time rock and roll party hits. Essentially, it's another rock and roll compilation of Chuck Berry music. I think I've got 3 or 4 up there, and I suspect that they've all got the same hits. Let's face it, they're all going to have Johnny Be Good. They're all going to have Memphis. They're all going to have Nadine, Sweet Little 16. They're all going to have Maybelline, Little Queenie. You know, it's Roll Over Beethoven. It's like, somebody's made a lot of money out of launching these compilations all the time. I'm sure Chuck Berry made a lot of money, but I bet he didn't get all of the money from a lot of the compilations that came out. Quite an unusual find. I found this record just yesterday, and I thought it was apt to show it because it's slightly different. Now, this is by a band called Golgotha. It's essentially a heavy metal band. Now, there have been several bands, several heavy metal bands with that name, Golgotha. But apparently this was perhaps the first. Now, it's quite a confusing story, this. So it's an album. This is their first album. It's got 4 tracks on it, and each track, is anywhere between 9 and 12 minutes long. I saw this and I thought, well, that looks like a respectable heavy metal album. And the guy in the shop that I bought it from, he'd sort of written a description describing it as being Spanish heavy metal. I took a punt on this, brought it home. It turns out it's actually not Spanish at all. There is a Spanish band called, or has been a Spanish band called Golgotha, but that's not these. This is apparently a new wave of British heavy metal band, Golgotha. They've only had 3 sort of real releases. The first release was in 1984, and it was a 4-track EP on 7-inch vinyl, and that was their sort of claim of being part of the new wave of British heavy metal. Their first actual album didn't come out until 1990. Strange, isn't it? I mean, of course, by then, 1990, new wave of British heavy metal had kind of gone, passed a long time ago. And I will say that in this part of what they're doing, it's developed from being sort of traditional metal that they perhaps played on their EP that they released in '84, and now they've sort of drifted into sort of progressive symphonic metal type thing. It's really hard to explain. I'm going to do a needle drop of this. I'm glad I bought it because it's quite unusual, but it's a real oddball record. I will file it away in my heavy metal records upstairs, but I can't really see that it's going to be one that I play a lot. They only released one more album after this, I think sometime in the early 90s, and yeah, I don't feel inspired to get hold of it. I would like to get hold of their initial 1984 EP, because that's a real classic, and yeah, it's one of those 7 inches that, you know, you're going to spend £300 or £400 on it if you ever see it. This one sadly is not quite so rare. It was mainly released on CD. There weren't many copies of their actual record that were released, but well, I'm happy to have one of them that was an unusual record. I actually did get it with the thought, like, maybe I could send it along to somebody as a VCLT, but I'm going to hang on to it purely because it is such an unusual record. See what you think. Okay, everybody, thanks very much. That was an unusual collection, I think. I hope you found that mildly interesting. Alright, well, thanks very much for watching. Check out my next video. Just say hello to everyone out there that comes along and watches my videos occasionally. Oh, and thanks to everybody that's commented on my video about my top 40 albums of the 1980s. I quite enjoyed doing that. It was stressful, but I'm glad I did it. And it's quite interesting to hear other people's reflections. Alright, thanks very much, everybody. Check out my next video. Bye.